Maxey from outside. Sixers lead, courtesy of Tyrese Maxey.
Hit deep to left field. Going back is LoCastro. It is gone!
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. Your host, Ryan Coyle, as always, continuing on with our college football preview series today. This is our last major conference team that we've hit on. I mean, we've hit on all the big boys from Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Michigan, LSU, Notre Dame, Miami, Clemson, Florida State, you name it, we've done it. And today we wrap up with Oregon as part of the Power Conference. We already hit on one G5 team with Memphis. We're also going to be releasing videos and podcasts on Liberty and Boise State. As one of those three, I think, are three of your more likely teams to go to the college football playoff from the G5 ranks. So I wanted to make sure I could get something out on all those teams as well. But you know, go back through the audio feed, go back through the YouTube page. We got you covered on all big things college football. I mean, we broke down the top games of the season, the top quarterbacks of the season. We've really hit on it all and all kind of the major players for people who aren't as in the weeds in college football and kind of just like the big picture stuff. We got you covered on all that. College football playoff predictions as well. So we wrap it up today with the Oregon Ducks, who are one of the major factors of realignment this year, transitioning over from the Pac-12, going to the Big Ten. And that's certainly an adjustment. A West Coast team in Oregon, now you're basically playing, you know, besides if you get UCLA, USC on your schedule, Washington, you're traveling halfway across the country, sometimes even to the complete other side in the East Coast if you play a Rutgers, if you play a Maryland. So one of the major changes in realignment this year for sure, and going to be an interesting kind of study case for like travel logistics and everything like that. It's like you're playing in the NFL basically, where the Rams got to travel to Philadelphia this week, or the Dolphins have to travel to the Seahawks, something like that. So I think that's one of the underappreciated or under talked about kind of things right now is like the travel and how much different that could be. Because you're not just flying down to LA to play USC or going to Washington to play Oregon. You could go across the country to play Rutgers. So it's going to be different. It's going to be a change. But Oregon, I think, is one of the programs that we've heard is more than equipped with NIL funds, and they're going to do everything they can to make sure this is a national title contender year in and year out under head coach Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning, 22-5 as he enters year 3 at Oregon, the former Georgia defensive coordinator. And I truly believe he was the guy for Alabama. Once Nick Saban stepped down, I think Dan Lanning was the target. He had some coaching experience at Alabama when he was younger. Under Nick Saban, he ultimately turns down Alabama. As we know, Kalen DeBoer goes over there down to Alabama from Washington. Washington's another program transitioning from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. But DeBoer gets a job in the SEC at Alabama, and Dan Lanning decides to stay at Oregon. He basically comes out and says, I have whatever I want here, whatever I need here. It's been rumored that Phil Knight is just pledging anything and anyone, whatever the program needs, whatever Dan Lanning needs, whatever the staff needs. Phil Knight's willing to kind of shell out of his pocket to make sure Oregon wins a national title before he passes away. So don't mean to prematurely put Phil Knight in the ground there, but he is getting up there in age. And from what I've heard multiple times, it sounds like his last kind of dying wish is for the Oregon Ducks to be a national title winner. So Dan Lanning turns down Alabama, stays at Oregon, and they transition from the Pac-12 into the Big Ten, and they're ready to make some noise. I think he feels like playing in the Big Ten helps him out even more with recruits, puts them on more of a national stage. You're playing the likes of Michigan. You're playing the likes of Ohio State. You still got a big brand like USC out there. You still got Washington, who you built kind of a rivalry with. So big transition from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten stylistically. Sure, the way that they play, but I think Oregon, the way that they've been recruiting and building this program up, they're kind of suited to play in the Big Ten. So it's going to be an interesting watch this year. But when you look at 2023, a real successful season, a Pac-12 championship, a win away from going to the college football playoff themselves. Go 12-2 last year, 8-1 in the Pac-12. They lose to Washington 36-33 in the regular season, and then they lose in the Pac-12 title game to Washington 34-31. Beat Liberty in the Fiesta Bowl, took a little bit of sour taste out of their mouth with kicking their behind 45-6. But a super balanced offense, super balanced defense. But offense, I kind of think, was a little bit of a peg above the defense. Really stole the show. Ranked second in scoring, second in total offense, and they were ninth in scoring defense. So it's still a really good scoring defense, but second in scoring and second in total offense. Hard to beat that, right behind LSU. Ninth in scoring defense, as we said. Bo Nix last year that orchestrated that offense, Heisman finalist. He graduates, first round pick with the Broncos, has already been named the starter, and he's replaced by Dillon Gabriel, who's one of, if not the most experienced quarterbacks in all of college football this year. Transfer from UCF to Oklahoma now to Oregon. And I think if he plays the full season, if he stays fully healthy, he's on pace to have the most passing yards and the most passing touchdowns in college football history. So potential historic season coming up. Dillon Gabriel enters the year as the Heisman favorite as well at plus 750. Oregon, one of the favorites to win the national title. They entered the season at number 3 in the polls. So 10 wins last year by double digits, 9 by 20 or more. The transition from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten are kind of the main storylines from last year as they head into this new era of the Big Ten starting in 2024. Last year, when you look at the offensive side of the ball, Bo Nix led this offense that was second in scoring at 44.2 points per game, second in total offense at 531.4 yards per game, and they were first in passing offense at 346.9 yards per game. Also had a pretty strong rushing attack, put up 184.5 yards per game. That was 29th best in the country. The point guard to that entire offense, Bo Nix, and that was, I think, one of the main criticisms of him coming out of the draft, where it was like, all right, so much of this offense is kind of just dink and dunk, these playmakers making plays, screens, checkdowns, etc. If you go out there and you execute this offense, which Dillon Gabriel has certainly the capabilities to do, and just get the ball to these playmakers that tend to be open and tend to be in space, the offense is going to do wonders. So Dillon Gabriel has said that as well. His job is kind of just to go out there, be the distributor, be the point guard. He doesn't have to be a Superman. He doesn't have to go out there and be Caleb Williams and put the team on his back, or be what Jaden Daniels was at times last year. This offense has more than enough around him and the system in place to really bring success to the quarterback position. Running back Bucky Irving, he ran for nearly 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns. He's gone to the draft as well. So is wide receiver Troy Franklin, 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns. And their center, kind of the leader of that offensive line, Jackson Powers Johnson. So your center, your star running back, your star receiver, your star quarterback, all out the door. But Oregon is able to just kind of turn it over and roll into the next guys. And I don't really think it's going to miss a beat quite that much. 4 of the best players in the entire conference head out the door. Usually you're poised for kind of a step back. I think Oregon is even more equipped this year and favored to potentially go, make a run at this Big Ten title, make a run at the national title. The offense does return 6 starters, though, 3 of those being on the offensive line. Running back Jordan James looks to fill the shoes of Bucky Irving. He's going to be kind of the bell cow now. He's coming off a year. He rushed for a little over 700 yards, but he had 11 rushing touchdowns, 7.1 yards per carry. He's a guy that is in position to kind of explode with a more advanced role this year. Tez Johnson is back as well at wide receiver. He should build off a great year last year where he had a school record of 86 catches in one season, also a little over 1,100 yards himself, and 10 receiving touchdowns. He's back this year. He's a big-time playmaker. Johnson's going to be kind of the guy, the focal point of this offense this year. And they bring in Evan Stewart, a transfer from Texas A&M, a former 5-star guy. He's going to be looked at to help make up for some of the production lost by Franklin as well. The staff is really confident in their tackles. Josh Connerly and Ajane Cornelius, I believe is how you pronounce his name. The staff is really confident that those guys are going to be able to hold their own against the likes of pass rushers from Michigan, the likes of pass rushers from Ohio State. So the staff is really confident in kind of the transition that they're making, where one reason, just for example, why I'm worried about USC making this transition to the Big Ten, they've built kind of a finesse squad, a track team type thing with Lincoln Riley playing in the Pac-12. Oregon, on the other hand, they've been recruiting for the Big Ten, recruiting for kind of the SEC, getting some of these big dudes up front. So I think they're going to be just fine at the line of scrimmage, while USC, it might take a year or two to be kind of like, all right, this might not be working in this type of system. I think Oregon kind of fits right in there seamlessly. And this offensive line is going to be a really strong group. Dillon Gabriel fills the shoes of Bo Nix pretty easily, I think. And then you got guys that were kind of waiting in the wings last year. And even Tez Johnson had a big year last year with Franklin. That production might even explode, a little bit more this season. When you go to the defense only returns 4 starters from last year's team. This defense was 9th in scoring last year at 16.5 points per game and 22nd in total defense at 318.4 yards per game. When you look at the defense, the headliners are the linebackers, Jeffrey Bassa and Justin Jacobs. They should be impact linebackers, I think, right away in the Big Ten. Guys that are seniors, really experienced players, really strong players as well. The defensive line took a hit this offseason, though. 4 of the top 5 interior linemen graduated from this squad. They brought in 1 transfer from Houston, Jamari Caldwell, but the rest of that, they're going to be relying on some youth to help fill those spots all across the defensive line. They brought in some highly regarded guys these past couple of years recruiting. They have some highly regarded guys in the wings. Some have already kind of transferred out, but of the past 2 classes, they signed 11 blue chip linemen. As I said, a few have already kind of transferred out the door, but with Oregon's track record of developing guys, you bring in raw kind of talent like this, not experience, that's not the right word, but this has this much kind of potential, the ability to kind of turn it on and be dynamic players right away with the coaching staff and with the development history that Oregon has shown. Some of these guys are going to be household names before we know it. The rush defense was 10th best in the country last year. So with all this youth playing and playing against better offensive lines, I think too, that unit could take a step back, especially with the interior. The 4 of their top 5 guys headed out the door. And we said there's more talent kind of coming up, but nothing beats experience, especially at this kind of level of football. You need some of that experience. So I expect that unit to take a little bit of a step back, but by year's end, they could be kind of back rounding into form. Jordan Birch, a 6'6" edge rusher. He's a senior on this team as well. He's looked at as the best player on that defensive line, going to be kind of their go-to pass rusher. And then they bring in Washington transfer defensive back Jabbar Muhammad, who gave Oregon a lot of fits last year. He's a guy that kind of plays all over the secondary. That's a really welcome piece for Dan Lanning, who's a defensive guy. They returned starting cornerback Jalil Flowers and starting safety Tysheem Johnson. Really, plain simple, talent everywhere. Lanning, a defensive guy. Sure, it might be some youth and some kind of growing pains, but this unit should be more than fine again. And with a really dynamic offense, this should be a team that's competing for a national title by the end of the year. They got talent that they're going to be relying on heavily, youth, but they got to grow up, and they got to grow up quickly because this is the Big Ten, and it's a little bit tougher than the Pac-12. All right, we will get into the schedule prediction. As always, as we've done with every team, we'll share our screen and go through game by game the 2024 Oregon Ducks schedule. Open up with Idaho. Last year they opened up with Portland State, and they beat them 81-7. I think this year it could be kind of similar. Boise State, team we talked about at the beginning, but they're going to be one of those G5 contenders for that playoff spot. So not a cupcake there, but I do think Oregon wins, especially having them at home. Oregon State, old rivalry game. Oregon State had so much guys depart after the Pac-12 folded. I think that's going to be an easy win there for Oregon, but it's a rivalry game. You never really take that for granted, but I'll give them a win there. UCLA, I'll give them a win there. Rebuild year for UCLA. Michigan State's a team I've kind of come around on. I think they might flirt with a bowl game. I'm really high on Jonathan Smith, the former Oregon State head coach, and Aiden Childs, the quarterback, a young quarterback there. But I think it could take some time to get cooking. 5-7, 6-6 type year for Michigan State. But going to Eugene and at the beginning of October, I don't think they'll be rolling yet. So give me Oregon there. One of the top 5, maybe the most anticipated game of the regular season. Ohio State travels to Eugene. I would assume College game day is there. It's going to be – actually, I don't know if I assume. October 12th is the day of the best college football schedule maybe ever. I mean, forget all the games off the top of my head, but great games that day. So maybe game day won't even be there. But this could be number 1 versus number 2. This could be a top 5 game. Georgia plays Alabama a few weeks before, I think on September 28th. So Georgia just say drops that. This could easily be number 1 versus number 2. It's going to be awesome. I do give Oregon the upper hand here for being at home, plain and simple. I think these two squads are pretty comparable. I do like Dillon Gabriel a little bit more than Will Howard, but the fact that Oregon is at home in this one is enough conviction to give me that Oregon's going to win this game. So give me Oregon there. Give me them beating up on Purdue, beating up on Illinois. Go to Ann Arbor. Michigan, I'm interested to see what they bring to the table. I got them at 9-3, but who knows? They could get the quarterback spot kind of figured out and be rolling as well. That's not an easy place to go into for sure and win, but I will have Oregon winning that one. I have them beating Maryland. I have them beating Wisconsin as well. I think Wisconsin's going to be tough, 7-5, 8-4. But be one of those teams where it's like, wow, they only were 7-5, 8-4. I think they might pick off a couple teams. I got them picking off Alabama, actually. But next year is kind of a takeoff year for Wisconsin, year 3. But Oregon win that game. And then Washington, I'm expecting a major step back with all the players that leave, as well as DeBoer. I think they're like a 6-6 squad this year. I think Oregon wins that game. So I got Oregon running the table. Only my second team that I actually had out of all the previews running the table in the regular season and going undefeated, them along with Miami. But then I have Oregon going to the title game to play Ohio State in a rematch where I have Ohio State tripping them up. So after a regular season that's undefeated, Oregon actually only gets the 5 seed in my projections. But a 12-0 regular season is great. And you're going to get into the playoff whether you win the Big Ten or not with that kind of season. But their win total, as we've talked about with every team, 10.5 wins. Over is +100, under is -120. It's a stay away for me, even though I have them going 12-0. There's a few games in there where I could see going either way, the Ohio State game and the Michigan game. And this only leaves you room for one loss. You need to get to 11 wins. So just say they drop one of the Ohio State or the Michigan game. You can't drop the other one. If they drop that Ohio State game early, then they have to win that Michigan game or this win total is going under. So I don't like to do anything where I like 9.5 is kind of my set line for these over-unders where it's like, all right, you at least get room for 2 losses. In this scenario, it's 1 loss or nothing. So it's a stay away for me there. +750 to win it all. That's the 3rd best odds, and +200 to win the Big Ten, 2nd best odds. A situation I'm not going to touch. They're going to be a no bet for me, but I'm very high on them going into the season, and I actually have them, spoiler alert, going to the national title game to play Ohio State round 3. That's how I had the bracket shaken out. 2 Ohio State versus 5 Oregon, and number 2 Ohio State winning it all. So could be a really good kind of 3-game series there that we potentially get between the Buckeyes and the Ducks. But as always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and we'll talk soon.